So let's say you've started investing in the share market and you've started to see some returns come through in your portfolio. Your portfolio is up 10%, 4%, or it's down 3%. And you're sitting there wondering, is this good or is this bad? Because if you're anything like me, you're probably wondering, hey, is this going well? Am I doing a good job of this? I'm often very insecure to know, is this going well or am I not doing very well? So in this video, I'll give you an example of a reference you can use to compare your portfolio against to see how you're going against the average. To start with, I want to look at returns first, just to make sure you're across how returns work and the key components of returns. So say you've bought about $1,000 of shares initially, and now 6 months on or 12 months on, those shares are now worth $1,100. So your shares have gone up $100 compared to the $1,000 initial investment. You're up 10%. That's pretty good. But that's just the capital gain. That's just the value increase of your initial investment. In the time you've held those shares, you may have also seen some dividends come through. And especially if you're in Australia, dividends are often quite an important part of the investing environment. So say you've got another $100 of dividends that got paid out as well. That won't necessarily come through on the price, but you're now in a situation where you've got a $100 capital gain and $100 of dividends paid out. So altogether, you've earned $200 on a $1,000 investment. So you've earned 20%. I'll say now that's pretty good, but I'll explain as well soon why. That's pretty good. So from that, you can see your total return is equal to the capital gain plus any income you've also earned. Often, we only look at the capital gain. This is where people are just looking at the share price go up or down in the time I've held it. That's fine. That's not incorrect. It's just missing a piece where you also need to look at how did your income go in that time period as well. So knowing how returns are measured, what about an example of what to actually compare your portfolio performance against? How do you know if your 10 or 20% is good or not? Well, one example you can compare against is the actual ASX 200 index. Now, this is the top 200 companies in Australia, market weighted in terms of their returns. So that basically means the larger the company, the more the returns that company has achieved contribute to the overall measurement. So someone like BHP, which is the largest company in Australia, contributes the most. Its movements can have quite a big impact on the index. And then say smaller companies like Ramsay or someone smaller like Coles, these are actually quite big companies, but companies that are not as big as the highest one will contribute less to the actual index's movement. So in your case, you might have achieved 10% gains on your portfolio, but then at the same period, the ASX 200 did about 12%. So you've underperformed against the index, but you do also have to make sure that you're doing apples to apples. So when you look at your portfolio experience and you look at both income and capital gains, you need to also look at the total return on the ASX 200, where they will show you this is what the capital gain was and this is the income that came out of it. You can also use the accumulation index as a reference, or if you're using an ETF as a reference, you can use something like A200 and look at the total returns there. A200 will tell you this is the income from the returns and this is the actual capital gain, and that's what the total return is. Or if you want to use the ASX 300, which is the top 300 companies in Australia, you can use something like VAS, which will also give you total returns there, capital and income. So the ASX 200 and the ASX 300 are potential examples that you can use to compare your portfolio against. I did 10%, and these indices or indexes, I still don't know what the plural is, but they then did 12 or 15%. So I underperformed. Or they did 4% and you did 10% and you've outperformed the index. That's pretty good. But difficult to do reoccurring times. Now, this is where most of the time people will say, I'm not that good against the index. I'm quite happy with the index, so why don't I just replicate the index, the ASX 200 or ASX 300 index? And this is why sometimes people will want to look at ETFs as an investment example, because maybe they're not as confident investing in individual shares and they don't want to spend time trying to figure out what's the right one or when's the right time to buy and sell. And instead they might look at just buying the top 200 or top 300 companies and invest that way. So that's an example why someone might move away from a very targeted portfolio to looking at something like an ETF, because they're quite happy to just achieve the average returns, which I'm often in the same case as well.